Agriculture and produce are perishable, time-sensitive, and temperature-sensitive. Before the interstate highways made it possible for truckers like myself to make such a haul, the fruits and vegetables of America's farms found their way to markets nationwide a very different way, over the shiny steel arteries that are the railroads of America. As you may already know, despite being a long-haul trucker myself, I'm also a big advocate of railroads increasing their participation in the movement of temperature-controlled foodstuffs in North America. It's a huge, long-distance market that's now truck-dominated. Much of the diversion of this business from rails to truck was the result of grievously misguided government economic regulation. For example, the interstate truck movement of fresh fruits and vegetables was never subject to economic regulation, while rail rates were strictly regulated, so it's not surprising that the trucks took that business. Chicken, now the #1 consumed animal protein, was originally regulated, but the U.S. Supreme Court ruled it deregulated for truck movement only in 1956. The court reasoned that chicken was an agricultural commodity, and if ag commodities moved by truck were not subject to economic regulation, then chicken was certainly included. The railroads were still regulated and largely kissed their chicken business goodbye. The light engine power that you see below is moving over the former Delaware and Hudson Penn Division. In about 2 miles is Carbon Junction, which connects to the Norfolk Southern Sunbury line. The blacktop path to the right is the former Central Railroad of New Jersey right-of-way, which we'll talk about in future videos, and the waterway between them is the Lackawanna River. It should be obvious by the size of the Lackawanna River when compared to the Susquehanna that runs past Wilkes-Barre as to why Scranton fared so much better in retaining more of its railroading past despite the floods of previous decades. During the warm weather months, the summertime foliage is so thick that seeing the tracks and even the trains is impossible at ground level. Right now, we're standing on the C&J side looking across the river to the D&H side. But getting back to refrigerated transport, the other side of this story is the short-sightedness of the railroads themselves. Using that same year, 1956, as a background, the Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, better known as the Interstate System, was also formed in 1956 and changed the way that truckers like myself moved freight across the country. Prior to the interstates, roads were dirt and the railroads thought of trucks as a basic 4 or 6-wheel vehicle of limited capacity. When the interstate highway system came to fruition, trucks instantly began siphoning traffic from the railroads, particularly the less than carload freight, which railroads didn't want anyway. Fine. Apparently, it didn't occur to the railroads that the truckers wouldn't be content to only handle less than carload stuff, and before they finally woke up, the truckers had skimmed off a sizable portion of the railroad's freight revenue, particularly the high-revenue, short-haul, inner-city stuff. The railroads now have a lot more freedom from economic regulation, but they must also now claw their way back into the refrigerated transportation market. They are doing so, but it's a seemingly slow process. They've lost their expertise and infrastructure for moving temperature-controlled freight. But why? Before we answer that question, let's take a look at how us truckers are doing it. This sleek and stunning Florida Peterbilt is shown backing into one of the warehouses in town, which is why I stopped our locomotives at this spot. Note the black and chrome refrigeration unit, commonly called a reefer, on the front of the trailer. This is what's used in a long and short haul trucking business for keeping temperature controlled cargo hot or cold. Over the years, the railroads and even private carriers have used these same reefer units on specially insulated boxcars to move perishable freight. The CRYX Cryotrans insulated boxcars slowly moving down the line on this Train 11Z are something we normally see over on the neighboring Reading and Northern. And it should be pointed out that these, in fact, are insulated boxcars, not reefers, and these do not have the refrigeration units. The temperature is kept constant by the car's heavy insulation. So with that little nugget of information, the question now becomes, what type of equipment is best suited for temperature-controlled freight on the railroads? Let's look at 3 possibilities. Number 1 is double-stack refrigerated containers. Number 2, refrigerated trailers on flat cars. And number 3, refrigerated boxcars. This includes the non-refrigerated insulated types that we just saw. Each option has its advantages and disadvantages. For a rail movement, from intermodal terminal to intermodal terminal, double stacks just can't be beat. It's fantastically efficient and low cost. It does free up track space in the intermodal terminals, something that is critical. But it does incur a weight penalty on the highway portion of the intermodal move. A container chassis combination will weigh more than your average truck trailer. Keeping this in mind, highway weights are limited. You can get some of that weight back by using a lightweight day cab tractor, but you're still going to lose some of that payload. This loss must be compensated for by reducing the terminal-to-terminal rail charge. The trailer-on flat car trailer, obsolete, right? Well, not quite yet. The trailer-on flat car trailers will eliminate any meaningful payload loss, also a lower investment risk since they can be used in over-the-road service if the intermodal doesn't work out. Their disadvantages are A. Increased train weight, B. Increased train length, and C. Reduced terminal track capacity. Last but not least, the refrigerated boxcar. Don't even think of using these in conventional carload service. Spotting a car at a cooling shed, picking it up with a local, moving it to a yard, putting it on a train to another yard, etc., etc., etc. This will rarely, if ever, be competitive, so it's best to use them in intermodal service. Truck the freight to and from central terminals. Think of them as intermodal terminals themselves. Locate such terminals near shippers and receivers to keep drayage costs down. Get the cars on existing Z trains as soon as possible. This is a low-cost method. The disadvantages include difficulty in finding return loadings, and the need to switch the cars somewhere en route maybe more than once, and the need to construct new terminal facilities. I know that the Union Pacific tried option number 3 with its RailX and Cold Connect operations. They kind of screwed things up by only having one terminal to serve the entire Northeast and one terminal to serve the Pacific Northwest. Too much trucking expense if you ask me. They also tried to shove that business into a less than daily unit train, which really wouldn't work for perishables. We'll keep the conversation going in part 2 of this series. For now, if you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments below. Have you ever wondered how your fruits and vegetables make it to your grocery store? Well, I know all too well. I made numerous cross-country trips delivering produce and meats of all kinds to the markets here in the Northeast from California, Kansas, Texas, Alabama, and Florida, and I have to tell you, it ain't no easy trip. Unlike freight commodities, agriculture and produce are perishable, time-sensitive, and temperature-sensitive. And since the average haul for these delicate items is anywhere from 800 to 3,000 miles, that leaves lots of space for things to go wrong. And in the trucking business, that can mean a refused load, something you don't want when there's 45,000 pounds of product sitting on your trailer. Before the interstate highways made it possible for truckers like myself to make such a haul, the fruits and vegetables of America's farms found their way to markets nationwide a very different way, over the shiny steel arteries that are the railroads of America.